Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The Movie Podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We've got a big show this week with 3 brand new reviews, with 2 playing in theaters and 1 now available to stream. And this one you don't want to miss. This week on the show, 3,000 fans, 300 cops, 1 serial killer, no escape, and M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. Everything is about to get real in the family film Harold and the Purple Crayon. Then finally, one of the most shocking documentaries you will see right now about the king of internet trolls and the dangerous outcome of feeding one of these trolls. And the documentary by Peter Ross is Social Media Monster. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows, what? A roar and a bursting of flame. The Movie Wire podcast.
There it is.
With just need people like me.
Podcast for hot and trending movies.
The Wire.
And here we go.
Inside his book, adventurous Harold can make anything come to life simply by drawing it. After he grows up and draws himself off the book's pages and into the physical world, Harold finds he has a lot to learn about the real life. In the big screen adaptation to the 1955 children's book comes Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Once there was a boy named Harold. With his purple crayon, anything he drew came to life.
Come on, everybody!
As he got bigger, so did his imagination.
Who's the porcupine? Let's go to the real world.
That's not how it works, Harold. You can't just...
Whoa.
Oh, that is how it works.
And one day,
We're going after him, right?
Nope.
they stepped right into our world.
It's so beautiful. Look at all the friendly people.
Get lost, Smurf.
Here's my atlas. The real world is even cooler than I imagined it was going to be.
Look out! Are you okay?
My insides are coming to my outside.
I thought I saw a moose.
I'm a moose.
Oh my god, you have a concussion. Come on, Harold can do magic.
With this little guy, I can make whatever I want. You try.
That's spider fly.
Oh, now that is creative. And terrifying. That's terrifying.
I'm gonna triple lock the door.
Do you know what brought you to life? It's what your crayon is made of. The most powerful, extraordinary stuff on earth. Wax. Pure imagination. You can't use the crayon all by yourself. It's too powerful. Let me help you.
I don't trust him. He's up to something.
With this crayon,
Nothing can stop me. Ooh, it's a porcupine. We're gonna figure out how to stop that guy. With this. You'll have to do better than that. Oh. Okay, I am getting really good at this.
What were you thinking?
Oh, no, honestly, I don't do a lot of thinking.
Harold and the Purple Crayon is the type of movie that I wish I had a red crayon so I can write warning all over it for families. Better yet, I wish I had my own purple crayon to draw myself out of the movie theater. Now, I love family movies. I love just going in and having a good time without overthinking about a critique. I tend to keep it super simple. Did it entertain kids? Did it entertain adults? And did it add value from teaching something or give the family something to talk about or think about? I really don't like to overthink family movies, but good God, did I get dumber walking out of Harold and the Purple Crayon, to the point I don't even think I can color inside the lines now. This film stars Zachary Levi as Harold, who we are introduced to playing safely in his book as a child as an animated character, where he plays all day long with his best friends Moose, voiced and played by Little Rel Howery, and Porcupine, voiced and played by Tanya Reynolds, who all grew up inside this book within a matter of the first 60 seconds of the film, and then they all decide to go out in the real world within the first 5 minutes of the movie. Why, you may ask? Because all of a sudden, Harold hears the voice of our author, Crockett Johnson, voiced by Alfred Molina. Why does this voice suddenly appear? It's not explained, but will become apparent within the first act of the movie that we don't need an explanation. We just need to put childlike adult Zachary Levi in cliche situations with a purple crayon. It's like Zachary Levi's agent thought he needed a play date, so they made a movie like this. We get cliche after cliche situations. For example, Harold befriends a little boy, Mel, played by Benjamin Botani, who has a single strict mom, Terry, played by Zoe Deschanel, who of course is the voice of reason between cliche situations. Each situation that happens feels like it's checking a box from the family movie playbook, but dumbed extremely down. And these situations happen so quick to ensure our writers David Guan and Michael Handelman can shove as many of these situations in the 90-minute runtime as they can. Guion and Handelman are responsible for Dinner for Schmucks and Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, which weren't horrible movies, but they weren't the greatest either. But this is a new level of dumb, where the screenplay must have been written in crayon, and not the small crayons, the really fat crayons. The original book of Harold and the Purple Crayon was 64 pages, and I can bet that the screenplay was about that too. I can even bet it had pictures in it for the cast to go off of, because the cast here looks so lost on what kind of movie it wants to be. Even with an experienced actor who's used to playing an adult acting like a child, Zachary Levi seems to try his best, but even this movie is too dumb for him. The childlike dialogue is way too stupid for children to listen to. There is a scene in the final act where we have two detectives shout, "There they are, there they go," and our director, Carlos Sandala, puts a focus on these detectives like we're supposed to know or care who they are. They just appear, and they are dominant on the screen to portray relevance. We get all these characters thrown into this film that has no build and fun characteristics. They just simply wander from one scene to the next with nothing important to say or do. And since we have seen all these cliches and ideas before, only done better, Harold and the Purple Crayon becomes a chore to watch. I found myself getting antsy before we get into the final act, where in the final act, we are introduced to a villain that feels thrown in. It's irrelevant, like the movie didn't know where to go. So our writers took out their big fat crayons and wrote in a villain to finish the movie off. This film did have a lot of potential if it actually stayed to the simplistic imagination and heart, almost following the innocence of the Winnie the Pooh tales. Harold and the Purple Crayon doesn't have enough to entertain kids. It has too much annoyance to entertain adults. It takes familiar family movie situations and just takes a grown man that acts like a kid and gives him a purple crayon that can create anything. And guess what? He does nothing interesting with it. This movie completely lacks charm. It lacks imagination or anything of interest. Harold and the Purple Crayon is a Crayola of crappiness. I'm giving Harold and the Purple Crayon 1 star.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out my reviews for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now.
Now available on video cassette.
This daddy's a baddie, and things just got a little bit more despicable, including this movie that was more despicable than Despicable Me, receiving 1.5 stars. Hear how it all began in A Quiet Place Day 1 that was louder than the last one and quieter in substance, receiving 2 stars. Revenge has never been sweeter, and one of the biggest surprises of the year in this heartwarming and entertaining comedy, Thelma, which received 3.5 stars. On the run, Bad Boys style in Bad Boys Ride or Die, which plays like every other Bad Boys movie, only our bad boys are looking like tired boys, receiving 2 stars. The story of Nation Unsettled in Horizon Chapter 1 that has the potential to be something, but we won't know until Chapter 4, receiving 2.5 stars. A mother and her teenage daughter must confront death when it arrives in the form of a talking bird in Tuesday, which felt like Disney After Dark, where Iago from Aladdin gets really dark, receiving 2 stars. You can't see them, but they see everything in The Watchers. And I was actually thinking that it would actually suck if The Watchers actually had to watch The Watchers, receiving 1.5 stars. And just a side note, this is the other Shyamalan Daughters movie.
It stinks. It stinks.
Anyway, studios still pretend that Chris Pratt has a voice talent to put his name on the marketing to a mediocre movie in the Garfield movie that received 2.5 stars. Freedom belongs to the fearless in The Bike Riders that took me on a long ride of discovery to make me realize, even with its flaws, it was a good road trip, receiving 3 stars. And finally, 2 best friends, one already has a family and the other is having a baby after a one-night stand, and life will test their friendship through the good times and the bad. And even at the bad times made me feel like I had a good time in Babes, receiving 3.5 stars. You can check out those reviews of my previous episodes, and while you do, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe, and don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Now, before we get into the last set of reviews, there is a podcast that is part of my weekly listening routine. Not only is it incredibly entertaining, but it's also with my favorite Wilson family in the Super Familiar with the Wilsons podcast. Make sure to give them a listen and a follow and a review. The link to their show will be in the description of this episode. But let's hear from the Wilsons now.
The Super Familiar with the Wilsons podcast. You know that family whose house you hung out in when you were a kid? The house was a little loud and chaotic, but always fun, and sometimes felt more home than home. Well, that's us.
We're the Wilsons, and we welcome you into our podcast with silly chat, ridiculous games, and interviews with interesting people.
Like a spin doctor. The Super Familiar with the Wilsons podcast.
Welcome home.
The father and his teenage daughter attend a pop concert only to realize they've entered the center of a dark and sinister event in M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. I gotta go to the bathroom.
Okay, Dad.
What's with all the police everywhere? I'm not supposed to tell.
You know the butcher? The freaking nut job that goes around chopping people up? The feds heard that he's gonna be here today. So they set up a trap for him. This whole concert, it's a trap. They're watching all the exits, they're checking everyone that leaves. There's no way to get out of here.
I've never felt this before. I feel out of control.
2 left. Where should I put her?
Thank you.
This individual that we're searching for won't panic. He's realized he can't get out. He's going to try to cause chaos.
Dad, what are you doing? You're acting weird.
This dude is next level insane.
What's happening?
I think you're looking for me.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
How you all doing? You having fun?
Woo! Come closer.
What's going on, Daddy?
Open the goddamn door!
I can't get away.
Let's just do this one last one. Enjoy the rest of the concert.
If you bought a ticket to M. Night Shyamalan's new film, Trap, I'm sure the feeling you got walking out of it made you feel like you were caught in a trap from the marketing that promised a much different story than what we got. Now, I said in a recent episode, and with my review of Knock at the Cabin, that watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie has always made me a little excited, because it's more like the thrill of a gamble, like rolling the dice on if it's really going to be a surprising, engaging experience or entertaining experience, or will M. Night Shyamalan appear like the twist of one of his movies and just slap the shit out of the viewer in the face and yell surprise with a middle finger. Now, with me at least, you usually get a 50-50 shot from at least an M. Night Shyamalan movie being entertaining. But after watching Trap, I changed my odds to 70-30. 70 being the house winning, taking your money, and you walking out feeling cheated. Now, Trap is an interesting premise that actually is inspired, or loosely based on, I should add, a true story from 1985. 1985 consisted of one of the most successful sting operations called Operation Flagship, where U.S. Marshals sent more than 3,000 invitations to fugitives across Washington, D.C., with over 5,000 outstanding warrants between them. U.S. Marshals sent invitations inscribed with the company name of Flagship International Sports TV, and the invitees were told they have won a contest and they are invited to a free, exclusive Washington Redskins game. Bus transportation was provided for the winners, where over 150 undercover agents disguised themselves as cheerleaders, a mascot, janitorial staff, caterers, and the media. Instead of being bussed off to the game, these fugitives were bussed off to Washington Correctional Facility. Now, even though I personally think that would have been a better story to be told in actuality, Shyamalan takes a different route with one man in a theater of thousands in a Taylor Swift concert type setting. And you know what? If done right, this does have a lot of potential of density. Only if you can ignore the ludicrousy of the premise of the plan that Shyamalan's writing presents. The first act of the film sets up a lot of positive potential where this movie can go. It gives us that Shyamalan curiosity of storytelling that we have become used to. But then when it comes to the second and third act, the writing comes crashing down as watching a car crash in slow motion. And that is what we've become accustomed to Shyamalan storytelling in the recent years. In the height of Shyamalan's success of his first set of movies, from The Sixth Sense, Signs, Unbreakable, to the first seedling of weakness in the back half of his movies with The Village, to the birth of his decrescendo of storytelling with Lady in the Water, we started to see a de-evolution and weakness to how to end a movie as his career progressed. Now, it's no secret if you listen to my show that I'm a rare advocate to some extent in Shyamalan when it comes to where he started his career and what he's become. When you start up at the top, the only way forward is going to be down. This is true in many diversions of life, where one feels a need or obsession about outdoing the prior success. But the judgment becomes clouded and over-analyzing and forgetting it's not about outdoing in film, but consistency in storytelling. But at the same time, it's just not the obsession of wanting to succeed that leads to the downfall. It can also be an overconfidence and ego that leads to overthinking a screenplay or banking on first ideas. One of the reasons I'm still an advocate in Shyamalan, because he does have an attractive directorial style, but his work in the last, say, 15-ish years has been a sign of not an overconfidence, but a stubbornness, and banking on an idea versus good writing to present this idea. When we talk about success starting early, I didn't walk into Unbreakable, Signs, or The Village after The Sixth Sense to be looking to be outdone by Shyamalan's big reveal, but many were, and that's where the bar was set with the audience. That was an expectation. Many flocked to see the Shyamalan's big reveal in his films, and that's an impossible feat to maintain by any filmmaker. Now, back to the movie. Like I said, when it comes to Trap, the premise is an interesting one. Instead of doing what we would think Shyamalan would do, which is create a mystery of this concert setting and having the viewer guess who the killer is, Shyamalan puts us in the point of view of our actual killer, Cooper, played by Josh Hartnett, who brings his daughter Riley, played by Ariel Donahue, to a popular pop concert of Lady Raven, played by Shyamalan's daughter, Salika Shyamalan. This is not the daughter that recently wrote and directed the god-awful recent film, The Watchers. This is a completely a different horrible film. While in the concert setting, we are introduced to some moments and characters that feel like a setup to something bigger to come. From an overly nice and overly trusting concert merch dealer to another parent of Riley's friend that are in the middle of a teenage conflict. And even though some of these characters are very thriller textbook and predictable, these characters were enough to really take me into the first act of what Shyamalan was going to do with these characters. The writing in Act 1 is good and symbolizes the good in humanity and teeters around the bad parts of humanity when it comes to conflict or drama. Even though good, there was a lingering feeling that these moments and interactions with these characters were moving too fast, and at times seemed a little too perfect or predictable, in which my feelings would become crystal clear when we get to the second act, and leads to the derailment of what we will see from the rest of the movie. By the time we get a setting change, the movie loses any and every piece of interest, where we can visually see Shyamalan throw everything but the kitchen sink at the screen, with hopes that some sort of intensity will stick. At one point, I thought to myself, maybe this is M. Night Shyamalan giving the viewer a metaphorical middle finger at a twist or a movie dragging the viewer along to nothingness. Now that there is an actual twist, marketing the movie for a premise and setting that appears interesting, then just ripping all interest away to become just another generic cartoonish made-for-TV movie. The entire second half feels like it was made with the intent to either insult the viewer in believing it's more interesting than it is, or it was meant as an extended episode of the TV show Dexter. With the only difference being that most TV shows know exactly how to define a character given their single episode runtimes. Here we have a 90-minute runtime, and by the time the credits roll, we feel we know absolutely nothing about our side characters, even our main character, Cooper. There is a level of frustration here because we do get a good performance from Josh Hartnett, and his performance almost makes this movie bearable to watch. But then Shyamalan just makes his character do really dumb things, and in the dialogue tries to tell us that he's smart. Most of the really stupid decisions we see come with spoilers that I won't reveal here, but I know I wasn't alone here because there was at least 2 pivotal scenes where the benefit of sitting in the back, you can see the audience's reaction. I could see a couple of audience members suddenly holding up their hands in a what the fuck motion, followed by a shaking of their heads. These characters are so moronic, and even more so, after watching Trap, me advocating for Shyamalan's journey in his career made me question if I really should be. Trap plays like an insult to storytelling, cinematic gaslighting, and misleading marketing. Trap at first glance can seem like a ridiculous premise, where the true story makes more sense for an actual movie. Because here, Shyamalan doesn't do anything to make us believe that this is a realistic situation, where we have this big sting operation with thousands upon thousands of people in one stadium, with the authorities looking for one man. But I can ignore this hole and this improbability if it's done well and it's done with an intent to actually thrill the audience and give us something entertaining to watch. But the problem we have is that the utilization of the setting is rushed, with almost every scene to escape is in the trailer and shoved in the first 30 to 45 minutes. Now, this isn't Shyamalan's worst movie, but it is one of the more frustrating, more apparent attempts to tell a story with a screenplay that feels like it was written full of ideas, but no idea how to connect the dots. It's rushed, the characters are idiots, it doesn't deliver what it promised, and it runs like an expensive extended TV show. Trap has a good story to be told somewhere in this mess, and that story is told during the first act of the film, with utilization of the setting and proper utilization of the characters that our main character meets, and with storytelling that uses both of these to make this story and setting make sense. But right when Shyamalan figures he has no idea how to make this setting clever, he takes the easy way out and turns it into a generic piece of lazy filmmaking, and takes a premise that could have been a good story and flushes it down the toilet with a double flush. If you are thinking of buying a ticket to Trap, just know the marketing treats this movie like it's a trap to steal your money. I'm giving Trap 1.5 stars. Prepare to pass through the looking glass where one man without a job who lives in his car can leverage his phone and free Wi-Fi at McDonald's to tear apart the fabric of people's lives. And he can do it without consequence. In the documentary by Peter Ross is Social Media Monster.
I tried to help a woman who was being beat up by a man. That's how this all started, with me trying to do a good deed.
I do think he's a sadist. I think he enjoys hurting other people. Matt Burdick likes to play the part of the hero. It all pretty much started with the IHOP incident. He wanted to save the damsel in distress. He didn't want to do it, so he went and asked somebody else to go do it for him.
The goal of an internet troll is to elicit a response. I don't think internet troll is the appropriate label necessarily for Matthew Burdick. He seems to have a completely different emotional need than most internet trolls. Burdick seems to have a craving to be loved, and if he doesn't get it, he then goes off on everybody and he wants to be a victim. The internet was conceived as a way to share information and new ideas. Personally, I use it to share videos of my cats. The original intent of social media began innocently, I'm sure. Pretty quickly, people found ways to lie, cheat, and manipulate. At this point, Matthew Burdick declared war on the city of St. Joseph. Everybody tends to create an avatar of their best life, leaving out the boring parts.
He told me that everything he does is a sort of Hunter S. Thompson or Andy Kaufman style bit. So he's coherent enough to make up a story like that when he thinks there's going to be consequences.
Well, most people do. Making it seem like your life is perfect is very different from catfishing on a dating site or financial fraud. It took no time for the darker side of social media to become evident.
I was doing an investigative journalism research project, and I was going to nuclear facilities.
Well, the first thing I did was look at a map to see where the closest nuclear facility was, to see if he's serious about this, how much danger is he going to present to the people in the community that I have been elected to represent. But you have to take these kinds of threats seriously.
Prepare to pass through the looking glass where one man without a job and a lot of mysterious money can leverage his phone and free Wi-Fi at Starbucks to tear apart the fabric of people's lives.
Emails just kept coming and coming and coming.
I'd never seen emails like these before.
And while this kept going on and on and on, you could tell that it was building into something.
And he can do it all without consequence.
City officials just completely ignored him.
I don't know how crazy he is. I hope he doesn't hurt himself or anyone else.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we're going to catch all bad content in our system. We don't check what people say before they say it, and frankly, I don't think society should want us to.
Now, this documentary came to me in an email to give it a watch, and every recommendation and email I get, I actually do watch, but only a handful make it onto the show. This is one out of the many of the independent films that don't get the time of day by studios, and that is a complete shame. Not only that, but Social Media Monster started streaming on Tubi back in May before being yanked from its platform within 24 hours and canceled from Prime Video as well, who both caved into this documentary's main topic, the internet troll of Matthew Burdick, and more likely due to his consistent harassing threats. Which, before I get into the review, I just want to state that shame on these platforms for taking part in the censorship of our culture and expression of vision from independent filmmakers. No matter if the film is good or bad, the intent of why it's not shown when given an appropriate topic should never be censored by a platform because of a fear of an individual. Social Media Monster is not only an important film in today's times, but a well-done, crafted piece of public frustration and accountability to how technology is being utilized, but also begs the question of the long small print of terms and conditions from our social media giants if they've actually read the terms they preach. This documentary by writer-director Peter Ross and a writing credit from Alfie Gonzalez tackle a topic of how technology can be used as a toxic tool for those seeking attention and relevance. Ross uses one man along with his personal experience and some great supporting interviews with a laser focus of balance of evidence and feelings behind each and every topic surrounding our social media monster, Matthew Burdick. Our director, Peter Ross, brilliantly organizes his thoughts to a crescendo of events to go from a simmer to a boiling of the viewer's feelings, with supporting facts from not just social media posts and emails, but uses the silver bullet to a troll, which is using his own content against him to prove his narrative. Matthew Burdick may not be known to many that he hasn't harassed, and Peter Ross knows this, and addresses the viewer to build upon the story of this troll of insanity. In the beginning of the film, Ross sets up the viewer with an incident at an IHOP, IHOP without giving too much context in the narrative, but rather allows those that witness the events to tell us what happened. The opening statement by Peter Ross is a well-written one, but takes about 10 or so minutes to mentally adjust to the opening events when the IHOP incident unfolds, to really understand where Ross was going to take us with his narrative. And when we do get the incident at the IHOP, it reminded me of scrolling social media to a Karen video, and the cynical side of me has to watch, and then watch another one, and then another one. Ross lets the footage speak for itself along with those present without adding too much of a narrative of his own. This was a smart way to set up the rest of the documentary, with allowing our main topic of Matthew Burdick introduce himself in what would be a Matthew Burdick way. The opening scene is a fantastic and strategic move by Ross to show almost a male version of Karen. I think the internet calls that Terry. But based on this documentary, I really think the male version of Karen should be Matthew. But that's just my opinion. Ross gives the hook of exactly what sucks us into watching videos on social media back to back. I found myself engulfed from the first 15 minutes on where Ross was going to take me on this journey. This is one of the rare documentaries that crescendos the events to really tap into specific emotions from fear, and not just any fear on just one mere topic, but the fear of one man and the fear of what one man can do to so many lives with no accountability from our tech giants. It paints a picture of the lack of structure and accountability, and at times I do wish that Peter Ross went into more detail of the why. It is addressed to an extent, but this did lead to another emotion that was triggered by this documentary, which is anger. And when anger is present based on Matthew Burdick's actions, human nature is to ask ourselves why. And this is a tricky skill for any filmmaker. When anger is present when watching film, watching these events unfold, and when I hit pause, I had to remind myself that there will never be a satisfying answer to why, because accountability will still not be present. So I can't hold that to this film. In contrary, I applaud it. The mere success of this movie bringing out these emotions from me means that Peter Ross is executing his narrative to what it was intended to do. To do this, it just can't be a mere opinion piece, and Social Media Monster isn't. It brings victims of Matthew Burdick in to tell their story, including Brian J. Myers, a city councilman from St. Joseph, Missouri, to give us his point of view from what was happening in the background in regards to how Matthew Burdick was handled, along with his own experiences. Now, some of the more interesting pieces of this documentary is the original social media footage that Matthew Burdick shot himself. This footage paints a picture of Burdick that only he can do, which is show an example of a self-absorbed, egotistical, and feeds on any sort of attention. And Ross shows great examples of the danger of an online presence when the attention doesn't meet the troll's expectations, which is a behavioral desperation to higher the stakes, from attempts to get people fired, death threats, shootings, to even a threat of blowing up a power plant. These are things that are presented online that bring the frustration of why no accountability. And it brings the fear of what if. What if Matthew Burdick was pushed over the edge? What if he had the confidence to commit these crimes? It's a frightening thought. And in the documentary, each interview brings her own set of opinions. Some are the same, some contrasting, some have different experiences on what kind of person Burdick is. From just a troll, attention-starved, narcissist, even the topic of a mental disorder. Or what City Councilman Brian Myers points out is that he's just a dick. I agree with Brian Myers. I think I spoke this quote by Brian Myers out loud numerous times during the film before he even said it. Wherever your opinion lands on who Matthew Burdick is and why he is the way he is, there's one undeniable fact that there will be an emotion put into this documentary. There will be a temptation to follow along, hoping for a positive outcome. The amount of time and effort Matthew Burdick put into obsessively responding to social media posts, writing threatening emails, posting videos, this amount of dedication, effort, and passion that's targeted for toxicity and negativity could have been redirected to do good or put passion in succeeding at a decent job. But just like any internet troll, they take the human nature to be attracted to negative feelings, and all effort will go into this. It takes one interaction for somebody to water this seed of negativity for it to grow into toxicity, and social media is a greenhouse to grow this behavior. Matthew Burdick took what he felt was the easy route to make everybody else feel as miserable as he is. Social Media Monster is a triumph in the way it goes about telling a series of events that took me 2 views to really appreciate what Peter Ross was trying to do. What I found so special about Ross's strategic vision of how to tell this story of the pain that Matthew Burdick caused all these victims is the fact he held nothing back when it comes to allow Burdick to define himself with his own footage. And Ross, obviously being a better man, shows empathy and even regret to a level to give the viewer a sense of summary, or ease if you will. That verdict is still floating around, but there is a small sense of closure when Ross closes out this documentary, closing up and summarizing his narrative and what he's feeling at this exact moment. Social Media Monster is a well thought out strategic balancing between factual social media posts by Matthew Burdick, interviews of victims, and Burdick's own videos. Peter Ross's visual of how to tell this story is truly what stands out in making this one of the most entertaining, thought-provoking, and a documentary that will bring out not just fear, but anger. And an anger not just for the disgusting Matthew Burdick, but the way social media feeds people like this. By the time the credits roll, Peter Ross leaves you with all the right lingering thoughts of social media, and there's no question that the internet has made life easier. But also, between the lines, Peter Ross asks, is it worth it? And since Social Media Monster has been pulled from selected streaming platforms, I will provide links to how to view this movie for free, including a link to watch it on YouTube. Check the description. The links to this movie will be in the description of this episode. I'm giving Social Media Monster 3.5 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you haven't yet checked out the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's crossover show, Back to the Balcony, make sure you do. Again, the link of that show will be in the description of this episode. Until next week, do me a favor. Make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film, and support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at MovieWireShow or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.